Welcome back, everybody, to Two Ball, Two Bold. I am Marshon Parker.
And I'm Nathan Tomlin.
And what we will be doing now is we're starting a new series where every video will be talking about the top 10 of their positions, starting out with the quarterbacks. We'll be going from 10 to 1. Our list may look a little different, and you guys can all debate on where you put them. And remember, specifically, it's for this season. It's not about how talented they are. It's about this season coming up, not future projections either. So again, we're starting with quarterbacks, and we're kind of going into each how we rate the quarterbacks, specifically for our preferences. I know for me, I look at quarterback and I look at a part of it is their production. Part of it is how I believe they'll be able to lead the team to victories. Because at the end of the day, it's all about winning the game, not about if you threw for 500 yards, about your ability to be able to be a leader of men, the face of a franchise, and a leader all together, right? So that's how my rankings kind of going to fall out. And Nathan, kind of give us how you look at the things going into this.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, it's a combination of things. It's talent, it's situation, right? It may be the team they're in, right? I may have somebody in my list that I have there, and partly because of the situation they're in terms of the team or the players around them. A lot of it, of course, is going to be the talent. I think for the most part, we're going to agree on a lot of the guys talent-wise. I think most of our viewers will agree with them being somewhere in this top 10. But where we have them, it may break down to where I feel like a guy's in just a way better situation than somebody else. And yeah, so that's how I looked at it personally, and just let's go from there.
All right, so
go ahead and start us off.
I'm going to kick us off, right? Number 10 is none other than Dallas Cowboy quarterback Dak Prescott. I have him as the number 10 quarterback. And, in our last video, I feel like I gave him a lot of props where I talked about the fact that I think he is the good face of a franchise, a good leader. And the fact that I give him a lot of props because the fact that he's going into a contract year, and I think he's still going to be able to hold tight and be the leader that he needs to be, and be the good soldier he needs to be. I think a lot of that means a lot, but it's not just about that. He's a highly productive quarterback. Threw over 4,500 yards last year, 36 touchdowns, had a almost close to 4-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, which is extremely impressive. Almost 70% completion percentage. The only reason, quite honestly, he's not higher on my list is because he hasn't proved to be able to be a highly productive quarterback in the playoffs. That's got to mean something. He hasn't proven to be a one of those top tier, meaning like top 3, top 5 quarterbacks in the biggest of games. But I do give him props for being able to be a face of, as much as it pains me to say this, the premier franchise in the NFL. That's got to mean something. It's got to mean something when it comes into terms of how we look at you as a quarterback, and he's been highly productive statistically.
Yeah,
I'm going to leave it at that.
Yeah, so I have him on my list too. So when I get to that order in the ranking, I'll just mention his name, but I'll talk about him now. No, man, I mean, he's coming off his best year.
Yeah.
2 years ago, he led the league in interceptions. Last year, he led the league in touchdown passes. He had a career high 69.5% completion percentage. It's the second most yards he's ever thrown for, 4,516. The 36 touchdowns is actually the second most in his career, but again, led the league. 6.1% touchdown percentage was second he's ever had. 9 interceptions, down from the 15, despite throwing 200 more passes than he did the year prior. Of course, missed some games that year. They went 12-5. 73-41 in his career as a record. I mean, his QBR was 72.7. After a couple years under 70, it's back up. So he rebounded very nicely. finished second MVP voting, second team All-Pro, his first All-Pro appearance. Like I said, it's coming off the best year of his career.
Mm-hmm.
And last year was the first year. Really, I mean, they had CD, but other than that, what offensive weapons did they have? They lost their tight end. They went to Pollard as running back, who didn't pan out as an everyday back. Brandon Cooks is older. He's not the Brandon Cooks from 5-6 years ago. I mean, the big questions for him is how's the running game going to be? Because that
Terrible.
obviously makes a difference for a quarter. No, I agree. Tyron Smith is not there on the blind side, although he's missed a lot of games lately. They have drafted more offensive linemen the last couple of years. How is that going to affect? Are they going to be still successful as an offensive line unit? Obviously, probably not going to be as good. Tyron Smith is going to be very hard to replace. I believe he's a Hall of Fame offensive tackle. If not, he's very, very close. What wide receiver is going to step up and help CeeDee Lamb? If he has to target CeeDee Lamb 200 times, his numbers are going to hurt for it because the other team knows it too. If we're sitting here and we know it, there are people a lot smarter than us, and that's why they have the jobs in the NFL that know that that's what the Cowboys are going to do too. But again, he's shown that the steady. We talked about in the last episode. He's in the prime of his career pretty much right now. He's 31, and his birthday's in the end of July, so he'll be 31 the whole season. You mentioned 8 more years. I don't think he's going to play that much longer, but 5-6 more years.
I thought he was 29. That's why I said that. Yeah,
no worries.
Yeah.
So he'll have a few more good years, left. He's playing the last year of his contract. I don't see an extension getting done at this point. So he has a lot to play for. Part of that situation, I think, goes to him in a positive way in terms of playing out the contract for a contract to potentially be a free agent. I think he's going to ball out. What's going to hurt him is the lack of weapons on his team. And I still think Dallas has a good chance of making the playoffs. So I get he hasn't won in the playoffs. Although to me, it's not as much him, as much as other things. He's 2-5 in his career in the playoffs. But, if you at 68% completion last year, we'll see. But I do have, like I said, I do have him on my list. But but I do like Dak. I think Dak in some ways is underrated because he's a Cowboy, and in some ways I think he's overrated because he's a Cowboy, right? I agree with you. I think quarterback of Dallas Cowboys is probably the hardest team to be a quarterback or face the franchise for. They're the most scrutinized. They have the biggest fan base. But if you're not a fan of Dallas, you absolutely can't stand them. It's like the Lakers, right? For basketball, or Yankees for baseball. They're not as successful winning as those franchises have been historically, but in the sense of you are either a fan or you hate them. There's no really in between. And I like him as a human being. I think he's a very good man. He has a lot of integrity. If he has any issues, with the franchise, you don't know it. He could easily complain and say, Jerry, pay CD, pay me. What are you doing, bro? He stays out of it, just does his business. So I like that about him. So my number 10 is Justin Herbert. So I have Justin Herbert as my number 10 quarterback. He did just injure his plantar fascia in training camp, which, if you know anything about plantar fascia injuries, they don't go away.
Yeah.
Unless you stay off it. He's not going to stay off it. So that is going to bother him. He broke his finger last year towards the end of the year, and I think he probably could have played through it if they were competing for a playoff spot, but they weren't.
Yeah.
You mentioned lack of winning. And if you have Justin Herbert above Dak Prescott, he may have more physical talent, but the lack of winning is even bigger because the Chargers have arguably had way more talent and have lost. He had one of the biggest blown losses in playoff history other than the Falcons. The only time he made the playoffs. They blow fourth quarter leads left and right. A lot of that was the coaching. That coach was an idiot. We talk about a guy that couldn't manage a game to save his life. He'd go for 4th down and 1 on their own 29-yard line. Like, come on, bro. The team is going to be more successful this year than they've been probably at any point in his career with Harbaugh. However, he's also playing with the least amount of offensive talent he's ever played with. Quentin Johnson is a drop waiting to happen. Butterfingers should sign him real quick to a endorsement deal. If he turns it around, then Snickers can do it. Say hungry, grab a Snickers and get off the Butterfingers. Eckler was an easy check down for him. Keenan Allen is as good of a route runner as there is in the league. Sure hands. Don't trust the receivers. You know, I love Ladd McConkey. I think he's going to be a baller. But,
yes,
you know, he's going to be in the slot probably most of the time. Their outside receivers I don't like. Their tight ends I don't think are great. Their overall offensive skill positions, their running backs are injury prone, and I can say that because they're hurt every year.
Yeah.
J.K. Dobbins has been hurt every year, even in college. So he has not shown to be able to play a full season, even in college with 12 games. And it's a new system. I think he's going to start slow. So from a counting number perspective, this is going to be probably, other than last year when he missed games, the worst season of his career. Counting stats wise, the fewest yards per game, touchdowns are probably going to be down. I would be shocked if he throws for 4,500 yards and or 30 touchdowns this year. But the talent is there. I think next year is going to be where you may see a bigger leap for him. And if Quentin Johnson and Josh Palmer, if Quentin Johnson can catch the ball and Josh Palmer can make that jump to be a number 1 or 2 wide receiver, because remember, he was number 3. They lost their top 2 wide receivers last year. Then things may be different. But I just don't see the talent level around Herbert to put him any higher than 10th.
Okay. He's on my list. Let's leave it at that.
But what, you got anything to say about him?
I think he is the third, maybe fourth. Now, mind you, I said talent is a part of the equation, but it's not the end all be all. I think he's the third most talented quarterback in the league.
I know the top 2 are, so you're.
If you just say, well, no. Actually, if you just say raw talent, he's probably the fourth talented quarterback in the league. But what's funny is I would say 3 and 5 are not on this list. Probably because they're too young. But I can say it because they're not on this list. I think Caleb Williams is probably the third most talented quarterback already. Just talent, just straight up talent. And I think you can make an argument that Anthony Richardson is the 5th most talented quarterback in the league. Just raw talent, just raw. Everybody's in shorts and throwing and running and all that kind of stuff like that. I think they're number 3 and 5 as far as just raw talent. I think that the Harbaugh effect. I think Jim Harbaugh is a Hall of Fame coach, and I think he's going to have a huge impact. I know they don't have as much talent as they've had in the past, but I think that he's been so undercoached. He's been so undercoached in both his college and NFL career that it's really underspoken about. That's how he was totally undercoached in college with Mario Cristobal, and he has been, unfortunately, had a coach that is not an NFL. He's not an NFL head coach. He's not an NFL head coach.
One of the worst game managers I've ever seen in my life.
And he was only able to get as many NFL head coaching checks as he did because Herbert is such a talented, good quarterback. I think with him, solidifying. I'm so glad that the Chargers drafted a tackle and they didn't get enticed to draft a receiver or something like that, because all this going to be. He's going to be one of those guys who's just going to be, hey,
They're booking tackles for 12 years.
I played in the NFL for 14 years. I made 8 Pro Bowlers. You didn't hear anything about me because I didn't get called for many holding penalties. I didn't miss any games. All I did was just make Pro Bowls, get paid a whole lot of money, and that was it. Just like his dad, right? But I think he has potential to be better than his dad, who was an excellent pro. I think one of those two guys on the outside is going to step up. I'm not saying they're going to be a Pro Bowler, but they're going to step up. I think McConkey is. I think he's going to be. I think he's. Anybody watch highlights of him at Georgia? He was so good. He was so good. He's going to be really good in the pro.
He just gets open. He's one of those Wes Welker type.
Yeah. And see, everybody always makes the white on white or black on black comparison. I think he's way more.
Well, no, like I'm talking. Welker. No, he is, but I'm talking about just Wes Welker's ability to get open was just uncanny. Like he just found holes, and that's what McConkey does. He just gets open. Like he doesn't necessarily create the best separation from anybody, but he finds an open spot, and he's fearless, and he goes over the middle. He's faster.
He's what they call, and that's what I was going to say. He's what they call, for his type of receiver, they would say sneaky athletic.
Mm-hmm.
He's not sneaky athletic. He's athletic. He's a legit 4.3, 4.4 guy.
Yeah.
But I think I just the coaching aspect. Football coaching matters more than any other sport. And if you have top in coaching, and I look, call me crazy. I don't know why I believe this, but I think J.K. Dobbins is going to be able to stay healthy. I know, and I'm a big J.K. Dobbins fan. I think he's a really, really good running back. I thought he was a really good running back for Ohio State. I thought he was a really good running back for the Ravens, and it was sad that he couldn't stay healthy long enough to show the production. I think he's going to be able to stay healthy this year. Why? I don't know exactly why, but I just think he is, and I think he's going to have a really good year. So he'll pop up later for me now. So I'm going to move on to number 9. All right?
Number 9.
Now, number 9, I think you may be surprised. I think you may be surprised because I think that maybe you might have thought my bias would have put him higher. And unfortunately, there's some people who probably thinks he doesn't deserve to be on this list. But I have Brock Purdy. I have Brock Purdy at number 9. And my, I have a very simple formula for him. The reason he's 9 to me is because the other 8 guys, I think that if they were the 49ers quarterback, they would have been better. Meaning that if these 8 guys were the Niners quarterback, they would have won a Super Bowl. But I look at Purdy and I look at him, I think, man, it's like people forget he's young. This is his 3rd year in the NFL. This is his 3rd year in the NFL. Last year was his 1st year as a full-time quarterback. Any other quarterback, if they would have produced in their first full-time year, a shade under 4,300 yards, 31 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, with a close to 3-to-1 touchdown ratio. And the only reason it wasn't is because he melted down against the Ravens. And he did melt down. He had almost 10 yards per attempt, which is amazing because people look at him as a check down guy. He gets the ball down the field, 72.8 QBR. He makes smart decisions, and even the idea of a game manager. Game manager is not an insult. There's something about if you can manage the game, that you can do what the coach and the system is asking you to do. That is a plus. That is not a negative. It is not. So to me, he's been able to be highly productive in 2 years as a starter. last year, him starting full time. He has made an NFC championship. You can argue he might have made the Super Bowl that year if he didn't get knocked out of that game. And then he's made a Super Bowl. And he played well in the Super Bowl against a very, very good Chiefs defense. So that's my reasons for having him at number 9. I think that he's going to do nothing but continue to grow. And people say, oh, he plays with the Monstars or he plays with the Avengers. Whether you play with a highly productive team around you, with talent around you, if you can still produce, there's something to that, because there's guys that you could put on the 49ers and they wouldn't be as productive. There's guys you could put on the 49ers and they wouldn't be able to get the ball to the talent. So, short and simple, that's why I have him at number 9.
Yeah. So I have him on my list too. I actually have him higher than you, though.
Okay.
Look, I used to play, they used to have fantasy football on Yahoo Sports for college, and I had Purdy. That team, dude, they had Purdy, Brees Hall. That was a good offense for college
and their
football.
receiver, I think, was Hakeem Butler, right?
Yeah, Hakeem something. I can't remember his name, but
Butler, yeah.
Butler, that's what it was. Yeah. So, look, I don't get the Brock Purdy slander. I really don't. Watch the game. You know, I feel like the people that are saying those things about him are not watching him. Now, is he in a great situation? Yeah, he's in as good of a situation as you could ever hope to be. So why are you hating on him for it? It's not his fault. Every other team passed on him, right? He wasn't even expected. The only reason he played is because the 2 guys in front of him got hurt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And really, even if his rookie year, Shanahan sat there and said, Brock Purdy's better than Trey Lance, he ain't playing him over Trey Lance if he's not hurt, if Trey Lance didn't get hurt. He's not, because you invested too much in Trey Lance, right? He's 17-4 as a starting quarterback in the NFL. Okay? I get it. He has talent around him, but he does succeed. He gets the ball to where it needs to get to. Look, you mentioned game manager. Peyton Manning was a game manager for the Super Bowl 50 run.
Tom Brady was for the first 3 rings.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I don't think he's a game manager, because to your point, he does throw it down the field, and he's extremely accurate. Look, he's 4-2 in his career in the playoffs. Went to an NFC Championship game and played with he tore was it rotator cuff he tore? Something on his shoulder. Something with his shoulder.
Yeah.
Couldn't, literally, or elbow or something. Couldn't throw the ball. Couldn't physically throw the ball. Okay. So really in games so elbow, yeah. So in games he could actually play, he's 4-1 in the playoffs. Yeah. 6-1 touchdown interception ratio. 6-1. Okay. That's and great. Again, you take out that game against and then even in the NFL, it's 3-1. Yeah, in the NFL in the regular season, 3-1. Yeah, right. You take out that game against the Baltimore game, and he's 44 touchdowns to 11 interceptions for his career, which is 4-1. Yeah. Right. 62% completion in the postseason is a little bit lower than what he's done in the regular season, where he's 68, almost 69%. Through the year and a third, or whatever you want to call it. His yards per attempt in the postseason was 7.9. It's 9.2 for his career. Last year, he led the league at 9.6, but even the year prior to that, it was 8.1. Last year, he led the league in quarterback rating at 113, but it was 107.3 the season prior. He led the league in QBR last year at 72.8, but it was 67.5 the year prior. Led the league in touchdown percentage ratio at 7.2. So 7.2% of his passes are for touchdowns. So again, I get it. Some of this does have to do with the offense, and that's why I actually have him ranked higher. The situation he's in, Kyle Shanahan's is right now in the league. There are maybe 2 offensive coaches that you can argue that are better than Shanahan, and it's Sean McVay, because I think he does more with. And you can make the argument Shanahan's better, but McVay and then Andy Reid. Look,
Andy Reid.
Andy Reid is the godfather. Okay,
yeah.
Andy Reid was one of those guys that's like, man, he's gonna be a Hall of Fame coach, but never wins a championship, and now he can't stop winning them.
Wait, really quick. Now, so on so what's funny about that is I used to always defend Donovan McNabb. I said people don't understand how good Donovan McNabb is.
Mm-hmm.
Now that I've seen Andy Reid's coaching career play out, now I'm
With
like,
Alex Smith, Nick Foles.
I look back and I'm like, was
Not Nick
McNabb as
Foles. That
good as
was
I?
Chip Kelly. Who was that quarterback? He had a good year. I can't remember who it was, but Alex Smith, right, looked
But
completely
now I go
different under
back and
Andy
I
Reid.
say, was McNabb as good as I thought, or did he just have Andy Reid?
I think
But
I think
a
I think it's a little bit of both. I think
little bit of
Donovan
both.
McNabb's toughness
Yeah.
was, but Andy Reid saw him and wanted him, so
Yes.
that tells you something. Um, anyway, back to Purdy. He finished fourth in MVPs, and yes, he does have good weapons,
Yeah.
and he's on a great team with a good defense too, and he's going to get a chance to win. But he doesn't play poorly in the playoffs. The 2 games they lost were not because of him, right? They lost to the Chiefs because Patrick Mahomes is the best player in the world. That's why they lost to the Chiefs. And Kyle Shanahan just needs to not blow a fourth quarter lead. It's a psychological thing, I think, for him right now. Like he needs to get over that in the big games. And then the other game, we pointed out the injury. So yeah, you can say, well, yeah, it's because he was hurt, so it's his fault. But come on.
Yeah.
Now, would they have won? Maybe not. But I mean, the game would have been a little closer. It's hard when the defense knows you can't throw the ball more than 5 yards down the field, right? Yeah, I love Brock Purdy, man. Give him to me. You 49er fans hate him? Come on over to the Broncos, man. We'll take you. Shoot. We'll trade you Bo Nix for him.
No, thank you.
Yeah, he wouldn't want to do that either. Holy crap. But anyway, so yeah, I did have Brock pretty higher. My number 9 was Dak, so we don't need to talk about him again. So I had Dak at 9, so we were pretty close on Dak. So go ahead with your 8.
All right, 8. Is the guy we talked about in our last video. Coach's son, tough quarterback. I think his personality and even the way he plays, it fits the city he plays for. Jalen Hurts. It's funny because Jalen Hurts, he had an off year last year. It wasn't the whole team just.
Well, second half of the season, really, just
that's
last
what I was
5 or 6 games.
and that's what I was going to say because at the beginning of the season he was like MVP talk, and see you interrupted me when I was just about to talk my talk, man. My poor Niners. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. My Niners they just beat them up and just ruined the season for them. Look, we didn't mean to do that. They just wanted to. They were talking a lot, man. They were talking a whole lot. They was yapping. And the Niners went in there, and then and instead of just beating them that game, what they did was they just ruined them for the rest of the season. God, man, but on a serious note, though, like Jalen Hurts, I said it the last video, if you would have told me when I watched him as a freshman against Clemson, that national championship, if you would have told me in, I don't know, 6-7 years, I would be saying Jalen Hurts was the 8th best quarterback in the NFL. I would have definitely said you were a lie. I would have punched you in the face because I would have said I can't trust you. But I love everything about him as a quarterback, as a man, as his improvement. He's not he wasn't the most talented, but you can make a strong argument that 2 Super Bowls ago, he was the most productive quarterback on that field. And I would have never thought anybody would be able to say that against Patrick Mahomes. Mm-hmm. Niners have him last year. They have a Lombardi trophy last year. They have Jalen Hurts last year. They are raising a Lombardi trophy. He's the tush push. I know a lot of people don't like it. I like it just because I think it's a play that really signifies. It speaks volumes about like the NFC East, what I grew up with the NFC East being, what I grew up with, like him being a tough quarterback, him being from Philadelphia. He has 2 excellent receivers. He gets the ball to them, I like everything about him. I like a lot of things about him, and enough that I could say, I don't think he's a guy that you really go into numbers with. But I have him as the best quarterback.
That's crazy. So do I. So
okay.
yeah.
With that look on
So
your face, I thought you
first
were going
one.
to say he wasn't on your list. Okay.
Oh
Okay.
no.
Okay.
Look, uh, I agree. Jalen Hurts was the best player on the field in that Super Bowl. Sorry, I think Patrick Mahomes was a better quarterback, but that game, that day, Jalen Hurts was the best player on the field. If he doesn't fumble, he might win that game. And it's tough to say, well, he lost the game. Look, he's the only reason y'all were in the game, or even playing in the game, or in the game on that day, right? Look, if he cuts down on his turnovers, he's higher, right? And that's the one thing I just, we have to look at. He had 15 interceptions. He fumbled 9 times last year. But 2 years ago, he was second team All Pro, was second MVP voting, was really the front runner until towards the end of the year. He started slowing down a little bit. So really the big question is, what Hurts are we going to get? The Hurts from 2 years ago or the Hurts from last year? You mentioned it in the last episode about him and Sirianni apparently were at odds. Now, I will say this. Sirianni apparently said, you know what? It's on me. I'm taking responsibility for what happened.
I like that.
And move on. And I do too. I'm not a big fan of him. I from what I see of him, but I like that.
Yeah.
They have a good, you mentioned it, they have one of the best duos at wide receiver.
Uh-huh.
They have one of the best running backs in terms of talent that I think is going to make their offense click a little bit more. They have a very good tight end that's productive. They're going to be one of the favorites again. He's done well in the playoffs. Look, in his career, he's 34-17 as a starter. He was 1-3 that first year when he started at the end of the year, and they were not good. So you take that out, he's 33-14 when he goes into the season as a starting quarterback. But the last 2 years, he's 25-7, right? He's 2-3 in his career in the postseason. But if you look at it, even last year, they were just falling apart. But we talked about it. He was the best player in the Super Bowl, so he steps up, and you talked about his character. Look, in that championship against Georgia, when Georgia should have won that game, Georgia was winning. Halftime, they benched Jalen Hurts. They put Tua in, right? Nick Saban makes that call. And Jalen Hurts was on the sideline rooting for Tua, was there for his team, didn't pout. Most guys, especially at that age, he's 19 years old, 20 years old, always been the best player on the field. He's going, he's sitting on the bench, and he's crying. And that showed you a lot about his character. And even though I can't stand Alabama, at that point, you're like, man, it's hard not to root for this kid. And you're really like, man, I hope he rebounds, and I hope he's able to be successful, and he has. And so it's hard not to root for Jalen Hurts to be successful, because you see someone that's like that, and it's like, man, most people in general are not going to sit there and do what he did. So, yeah, but I had Jalen Hurts at 8. So that's funny. First one we had matched up at 8.
There we go.
Go ahead with your number 7.
So, continuing the string of guys who, if you would have told past me that I was putting them this high, another former SEC guy, a guy that for the longest, I just didn't get it. I just thought he was a guy who just put up crazy numbers. I had him on a few of my fantasy football teams because he did put up a lot of yards and was incredibly talented. But I flipped on this guy after watching him play more, because he became the quarterback of my favorite team's division rival. And when you hear, and it's Matthew Stafford, by the way. When you hear some of the top tier quarterbacks, especially the young ones, talk about him, they talk about him like with such a glowing kind of admiration. I heard like Caleb Williams talking about him. I heard CJ Stroud talking about him. CJ Stroud was talking about Matthew Stafford. He's like, you guys just don't get it. Like, you got to watch the film on him and these guys. And I'm just like, man. And the thing that really did it for me was just seeing how he performed last year. Because after that injury-riddled year, I thought he was done. I was like, well, he's got enough money. He's got his ring. But watching how he performed last year with a very, very young offense, because Cooper Cup missed the vast majority of the year.
Yeah.
Looking at him, he's always been extremely talented. But watching him with good coaching, with a solid foundation around him, Matthew Stafford is a really good quarterback. He's still going to kind of throw some interceptions. It's just going to happen because I think when you have a strong arm like that, you're going to really trust your arm. It is not a coincidence that when you look at the stronger arm quarterbacks, even the great ones like a John Elway, a Dan Marino, who, they'll come up in the future and some things that we talk about, but that are like top, the top of the top, the cream of the crop of all time. Or you look at a guy like a Josh Allen or even a guy like a Mahomes. Mahomes has a crazy strong arm. They're going to throw some interceptions and you're going to be like, hey, what the heck happened there? But they just trust their arm so much. We've talked about it in a couple episodes ago where I told you the Rams scare me as a Niner fan. And that's because even at, 36, 37 years old, Matthew Stafford is a still highly productive, still talented, good quarterback who I've seen be a good leader. He's always been a good come from behind quarterback. Even when he was on those porous Lions teams.
Well, they were always behind, though, the Lions, too.
Yeah, which gives you, if you have more opportunities to come back in, you're going to have more fourth quarter comebacks, right? But nonetheless, I have him 7th on my list.
So I actually don't have him on my list. He's just outside of my top 10.
What is he, number 11, 12? What? Or you just didn't even?
But, yeah, he's a good quarterback. It's crazy. Last year he made the Pro Bowl. It was his second Pro Bowl. But part of the reason I didn't take him, man, I still don't really trust the Rams offensive line. I just think there are more quarterbacks that are better at this point moving forward. But I do like Matt Stafford, man. He's been a good quarterback for a long time. It's shocking that he's only made 2 Pro Bowls. Last year was the first season he got any MVP votes. He finished 8th. I mean, it's crazy. We've talked about him a little bit before and how he's probably not a Hall of Famer unless he can have about 3-4 more years where he gets his counting stats so high that he's, top 4 or 5 all time in some stats. But, he's a fringe top 10 to me, so I'm not mad at someone putting him in the top 10. I just didn't have him. Yeah. And it's funny, so I'll go with who I have as 7th. And it's actually ironic because I have Jared Goff actually at 7.
Okay.
So I think it's funny because they got traded for each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
Goff had been to a Super Bowl and then went to the conference championship last year. 3 out of 5 years on the Rams who went to the playoffs. And really, if you take away that rookie season, which he was the number 1 pick, and you never expect the playoffs when you pick first.
And if because it's Jeff Fisher.
That doesn't help either. And then 1 out of 3 years in Detroit, although, for the foreseeable future, they should be making the playoffs. They just signed a big contract. But last year, career high in completion percentage. The last 2 years are 2 of his 3 best years in QBR, other than the year that they went to the Super Bowl and the Rams. To me, this is as much of a situation fit as anything else. He does have a good arm. He's extremely accurate. And Matt, you had Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford's not accurate as far as NFL quarterbacks. So he's 63% for his career. Yeah. And even last year, 62.6. Goff is much more accurate. Yeah, but Goff does too. He's different. He doesn't have the same kind of arm strength as Stafford, but he's a lot more accurate. They have a great offensive line. He has good weapons. He's in a very good system. He's a game manager plus, right? Because I think he has the ability to win you games, but you do need to protect him. He's one of those quarterbacks that if there's pressure on him, he's not great. Matt Stafford's similar in that sense. Matt Stafford will try to make some throws under pressure that get picked off. Goff doesn't throw as many interceptions. He does have some games that are pretty bad. He gets sacked more. he gets sacked more under pressure. But I like Goff, and he is a pretty successful quarterback. I mean, he's only in his 9th year, going into his 9th year. And again, for him, it's as much of the situation And for this year going in, I would rather have Goff in Detroit than Stafford on the Rams. I feel like Goff is above Stafford. It's one of those rare trades that work for both teams.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, where both teams do win. I don't think the Rams win the Super Bowl with Goff, and if at this point they had Stafford as the quarterback, Detroit's just spinning their wheels because I don't think Stafford is going to get them to a Super Bowl at this point. So at the Lions, the Super Bowl at this point. So, did you have Goff on your list or no?
No.
No.
And that's not. I think Goff is good. I think if the
Mhm.
Lions have Stafford right now, I'm even more nervous
Yeah, I like
because
Goff on that team more than Stafford because he's more accurate, and he's not gonna Stafford's gonna lose you some games because he's gonna have some games where he throws some interceptions. And with the Lions team, how they're assembled,
Mhm.
I think it's better that they have a quarterback that's more cautious than a quarterback that's more aggressive with the team that they have. That's
That's a
just my
good point.
opinion.
Well,
Yeah.
that's a good point. I think he would unlock uh, uh, James Williamson. And I think that
Jameson Williams.
Jameson Williams. Oh, good
Yeah.
lord. And I think that Amon St. Brown would love him. Like that's the one thing is these receivers who play with Stafford. It's like Golden Tate. He would not hear when people. He would say, and I'm sure he probably has some other reasons too, but he would just gush over how much better Matthew Stafford was than Russell Wilson, going
Mhm.
from Seattle to Detroit. And a lot of these guys, I'm telling you, the pros, the way they talk about Stafford
Mhm.
is it has to add into the equation of things, right? How your peers
Mhm.
see you. Now, sometimes it just doesn't make any sense, especially in the NBA. In the NBA, they talk about their peers sometimes, and you're like, what? Like a lot of young players in the NBA. This is totally off topic, but a lot of young players, you know who they look up to as the guy? Paul George. Like if you hear young guys talk about Paul George, it's kind of like how the generation before talked about Kobe.
Mhm.
But yeah. So, anyways, we're moving on to 6.
6, yeah.
So I think you're going to be surprised at how low he is to me. And it's not because I don't think he's talented, because I've spoken many times before about how he's a blue chipper and that I think he overcomes a lot of deficiencies of the organizations he's in, which is a terrible organization and always has been, at least the vast majority of my life and your life. Um, but I can't get over the injury factor, and I can't get over the fact that they're really talking about his hand injury with a lot of issues. But that's Joe. And that's the only reason he's number 6 is because he's really only had 1 year where he wasn't injured, and now they're talking about when was he? Every year except for the Super Bowl year, he's been injured.
No, they went to the AFC Championship game that other year and they lost to the Chiefs. Every other year he's been healthy.
They've been to the AFC Championship once.
Twice. They went to Super Bowl. They beat the Chiefs once and they lost to the Chiefs once. Remember when they bet on it? The Bengals, the Cincinnati mayor bet the Kansas City mayor, and he called, and then Kelsey called him a jabroni. You remember that? Where Kelsey said, "We're gonna go there. We're gonna beat that jabroni." You don't remember that? It
Okay.
was 2022, back-to-back years. They went to the AFC Championship game.
Okay. So 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
2 years he's been injury free. The rest of the years, I mean, heck, even in
Played 10
college,
games the other 2 years. Played 10 games. He got hurt halfway through the year.
even in college, he really had 1 year he put together, right? Yeah. So the and again, this hand injury thing, I'm hoping for his sake and for our sake as viewers that it's not as bad as people are saying it could be. But I mean, heck, I have enough confidence in him that I have him at number 6. I think he's cold, man. He is one of, and the big reason he's number six is because, or even just on this list in general, he is one of a handful of quarterbacks, or I guess a handful with a additional mutated pinky added to it, that I really believe can overcome what is going on with being a part of a terrible organization. He's a Bengal, and he led them to the Super Bowl, and he led them to, like you said, I don't know how I neglect that, but another AFC championship. The only thing keeping him away from right now, us saying he's a future Hall of Famer, is the fact that his body is betraying him. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's extremely talented. You can make an argument that he is I don't think he is, but you can make an argument that he's the greatest college quarterback of all time.
Greatest season. You can say season. Statistically, it's accurate.
I still say Cam Newton is.
But statistically, you'd be accurate if you say they're all the records, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, he played with
that team was stacked. Oh my God!
That's what I was gonna say. He played with, you can argue,
like nine guys drafted on the offense that year.
You can make a legit argument he played with the number 1 and number 2 receivers in the NFL. You can make an argument. So, I mean, I get it. But stats don't really tell it with him. I mean, especially last year, he barely played. He's number 6 on my list.
So obviously he's on my list. I have him higher than 6th. He's played 4 seasons in the league. His first season, they were awful, obviously.
Yeah.
Played 10 games. Came back, won comeback player of the year. Right. Led them as a wild card on the road, 3 road wins.
Mm-hmm.
Right, to the Super Bowl, and almost won that. I mean, if it wasn't for Aaron Donald, the Bengals probably win that Super Bowl.
Chase was wide open on that.
You got to have time to get the ball to him, right? And that's
been
the problem
for
the Bengals
I know.
Since he's been there. And then you can also argue that that pass interference on the linebacker around the goal line too, as the Rams got lucky with some pass interferences, didn't they? The Saints a couple years before, and then that one. But anyway, and then the year after that, they had their best year. They were 12-4, or they went 12-5. Mm-hmm. He was 12-4 as a quarterback that year. But look, 2 seasons he's been healthy, despite all the issues with the organization. Went to Super Bowl, went to the AFC Championship game. Mm-hmm. His career, he's a 68% completion. Okay, he came into the league with 65% the first year without Jamar Chase. Then you add Jamar Chase, he leads the league his second year in completion percentage of 70.4, then 68.3, 66.8. So he's very accurate. 97 to 37 touchdown interception ratio, so about a 5-2 touchdown interception ratio. 7.5 yards per attempt. He's led the league in completions one time. It's 27-15 if you take out his rookie year where they were 2-7-1 during his starts. He's 5-2 in the postseason, completing 67% of his passes, which is right on par with his career in the regular season. 9-4 touchdown to interception ratio, right on par with his regular season. 7.3 yards per attempt. And yes, the organization is not good, but in terms of skill positions, they do have one of the top wide receiver duos. Jamar Chase is one of the top 5. Okay, wherever you want to put him, but I think he's in the top 5. T. Higgins is as good of a wide receiver too. I mean, he's a top 5 wide receiver too, right? And then they drafted Jermaine Burton in like the 3rd round. I can't stand this guy. He was on Georgia, left Georgia, good riddance, goes to Alabama to win, and they lose. I love they beat Georgia, and then he's sitting there barking. It's like, bro, you still don't have a championship. Kick rocks. But anyway, he is a speedster, and if he can hold on to the ball, you get a guy that's going to be in the slot to be able to run the seam deep, because it's hard to have safeties over the top against this team because Jamar Chase requires 2. And T. Higgins one-on-one against the second corner is a mismatch against a lot of teams too. Health is the biggest concern with Joe Burrow, and I did take that into account. However, I do think he'll be healthy this year. We'll see. I mean, any of these guys, that's the thing with quarterbacks, right? All it takes is one hit.
Yeah.
And these guys are out. But this was number 6, right? You had him at 6?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So my number 6 was Brock. I had Brock at number 6.
Oh, wow.
So and we already talked
Yeah.
about him. So yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll go on to number 5. So go ahead.
Okay, so number 5 for me, and see, I guess my whole list has probably been a bit controversial for some, but this is where it probably really gets really controversial.
Only if you say
Number,
Mahomes right now.
oh God, no, come on, you already know. You wait till we do our time quarterback list. Anyways, and see what I do with that. But so for me, number 5 is Lamar Jackson, and I've already said I think he's going to be. We've said it in one of our previous episodes. He's a 2-time MVP. I think he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. I think he is of the probably the top 3 most electrifying quarterbacks, but he might be number 1. He might be number 1. Most electrifying quarterbacks. I always thought he was a much better passer than anybody wants to give him credit for. I couldn't believe that people were trying to say, "Oh man, maybe he should be a receiver." That was just crazy to me. Like I watched him play at Louisville, and I'm like, "This is not a receiver. This is a quarterback." Yeah, he's got a funky delivery, but so did Philip Rivers, who we both have agreed we think he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. Um, the fact that he was such a freak athlete, I couldn't. One of my biggest football pet peeves of the last 15 years has been the whole Lamar's a running back, Lamar's a running back, he's a running back, he's a running back. I never could stand that on the internet. Never could stand it. But the reason I have him at 5 and not higher is, in which 5 is still, if I'm saying he's the 5th best, quarterback going into the next season, it's still high, is because we just haven't seen him. He had a good game. He had a good game the first playoff round that he played in last year. But in the AFC Championship game, to me, he left a lot of meat on the bone. Like, and it's been this season, it was the opposite, I think, what everybody has said. Before it was, oh, all he could do is run. He can't get the ball down the field in the playoffs. I watched that Chiefs Ravens games, and it seemed like it got in his head because there were so many plays where I just said, take off. What are you doing? Take off. That he easily could have ran for 10, 12 yards and kept the drive going. And I could be totally off on this, but it felt like there was so many moments in an AFC Championship game where he had in his head, I can't run. I can't be that running quarterback. I got to get the ball down the field. And if he would have just played to his talent level, who cares if you end the game with 160 yards, 200 yards, 180 yards, and people at the end of the game say, "Oh, well, he didn't. He only passed for this many yards." Who cares? The point of the game is to win it. He could have easily ended that game with about 112 yards, got about 6 or 7 first downs, kept the drives going, and they could have won that game. They could have won that game. And then he would have been in the Super Bowl. Granted, I think he would have lost him. Well, no, I can't say that because the way they played him early in that year, golly, they might have won it. He might have been raising the Lombardi trophy. But I really do believe in that game he had it in his head, I have to beat them with my arm. And until I see him in an AFC Championship game or a Super Bowl produce at a high level, and forget producing, win, I can't have him, even though I'm about to totally contradict myself with who is in my top 4.
You have to, because there's not that many that have won the championship.
But the thing is this, I believe with the Ravens organization, he should have won a Super Bowl by now. He should have won a Super Bowl by now. These other guys, aside from the number 1 guy, I can't say that they should have won a Super Bowl by now. I look at Lamar Jackson and I say, you should have a ring by now. And that's the reason why I'm saying he has to show me something first before I could have said going into the season he was in the top. The other guys, they haven't had those opportunities, except the number 1 guy, and he's done it. So,
Gotcha.
That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I have him on my list too. I have him higher. Look, he's a 2-time MVP. His
Yeah.
lowest QBR other than his rookie season is just 56.8, which means he was slightly above league average. But
Uh-huh.
and that was a couple years ago. The other 4 years are over 60.
Yeah.
He had a career high last year, 67% completion percentage, career high 3,678 yards, career high in attempts and yards and completions, a 125 to 45 touchdown interception ratio, 8 yards per attempt. Last year, his career average is 7.5. Last year was his first MVP was an outlier year. Like 9% of his passes were touchdowns that year. That's dumb. That's not real. Last year it was 5.3, which is much more realistic. And if you look at his other seasons, other than again his rookie year where they didn't really throw the ball much, because they middle of the season went from Joe Flacco to Lamar. Hard to change your whole offensive system in the middle of the season when you have two very different quarterbacks like that.
Yeah.
But other than that year, 4.2 was his lowest. 5.3 was right in par with what he does for his career in terms of touchdown percentage. He won the MVP a lot of because of what he did with the lack of talent around him in terms of skill position players. Obviously, the number one defense, they have a very good offensive line, but Andrews missed a lot of games. They had 2 or 3 running backs that got hurt. A rookie wide receiver, number one wide receiver. I disagree with you on this in terms of him should have won, because until last year, they did not address the wide receiver position for this man. So if you want to make him a quarterback and want to allow him to be able to throw the ball, you're limiting him, because look at the receivers they had. And even last year, they drafted Zay Flowers, who I think he's a very good wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
They tried Hollywood Brown. I don't think he's a great receiver. He's fast, but that's it. I don't think he's a great route runner. I don't think he's got great hands. Andrews is a great tight end. He's one of the top tight ends in the league. But in terms of wide receivers, they really haven't put that talent around him.
Can I say something really quick?
And their offense is going to be better, and I think it's going to open up the passing game for more this year because of Derrick Henry. He's the best running back they've had since he's been there, and their line is very good. They drafted an offensive tackle in the second round, Rosengarten out of Washington. Go ahead.
They should have been in the Super Bowl his first full season as a starter, and they should have been in the Super Bowl last year.
That year, the first full season as a starter, if I remember correctly, that's the year they played the Titans.
Yeah,
and Derrick Henry ran for like 200 yards on them. So that is different, because that was not him. That their defense let them down in that game.
But how did
you can say he didn't? He threw 59 passes that game because their defense was awful. Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry were destroying them in that game. That's why they lost that game. He's not. Listen, if your quarterback throws the ball 59 times in a game, you lost. I don't care who your quarterback is. That is not a winning formula.
My remembrance of that game is that he had a terrible first half. Now,
he did. But Derrick Henry trashed them.
I get that. But let me ask you a question then, okay? If that's a bit unfair. If there were other quarterbacks on that team of higher caliber that played the way that they're capable of playing that first half, do you think that they would have had a chance to win? Or do you think it was just a snowball effect?
It's hard to say, but sure, maybe a couple quarterbacks that are out there.
To me, I look at that season was his. Is it the 85? Is it the 85 Dan Marino season or 86?
When he threw for 4,800 yards, or 5,000 yards. That was his second year, so 84.
84. So that was in
when they went to the Super Bowl. When they went to the
Super Bowl and they lost to the Niners. That was his 85 Dan Marino season. Like that's the outlier season where it's like this is the season of. It's just like Patrick Mahomes' first year as a starter. He'll never have those stats again, right? But he still doesn't mean he didn't get better as a quarterback. It just means usually these Hall of Fame quarterbacks in year 2, 3, 4, or 5 are going to have those outlier seasons that they just don't have again. It doesn't mean they're not a better player. Lamar Jackson's a better player now. He's not as athletic as he was because he's taking more hits. But he's still a freaky athlete.
But I would argue with that season though, right?
Yeah.
The year before, remember they made the playoffs and they weren't going to make the playoffs, and they switched from Flacco to Lamar Jackson, and they really didn't throw the ball because they didn't have the right playbook for Lamar.
Yeah.
So no one knew who they were. No one knew.
Yeah.
Everyone thought Lamar was going to just run the ball, and that's why he had so much success throwing it. Well, by the end of the year, you have a different system set up. You have more information on him and everything.
Yeah.
How many quarterbacks win in their second year as a starting quarterback in the NFL? And it really was his first full year.
I get that. Trust me, I get it. I think that there's two big opportunities. Last year and that second.
Last year was a big one.
You cannot. So, and he's not the only quarterback. He's not the only quarterback that has had years where he probably should have won it. So it's not. I don't hold it against him in terms of, oh, he can never do it. But we can't sit up here and act like he didn't have those opportunities. And that has to be something that's held against him. It's where I think he's at a point now in his career where it's like, okay, you have to prove.
He's only 27.
Well, I know, because he was so young when he got in the league, but he is at a point though where he's got to show that he can be a Super Bowl quarterback. He's got to. Like this next season.
See, but you then saying this is what you're contradicting yourself again, because you're saying he's got to prove he's got to be a Super Bowl quarterback.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about how he was hesitant to run. Right. And when you think of a Super Bowl quarterback, I get what you're saying, that he needs to do what he needs to do to win. He needs to win. Yeah. I could point honestly at the coaching last year too. Why did they not run the football? They didn't even attempt to run the ball.
I get that, but
the game was close the whole game.
Yeah, but
there's other things than just Lamar. I don't think Lamar played terrible last year. I mean, he wasn't great, but I don't think he was terrible.
This is what I mean by that. So, and I think the king of this, and I promise you, I'm not just saying this because I'm a Niner fan. The king of this was Steve Young. Steve Young knew when I'm dropping back, reading the field. It's open. I'm going to get those 8 yards and get that first down. And my hope was at this point in Lamar Jackson's career. Now, granted, Steve Young didn't get that till later, but he didn't become a starter until later. He did not become a starter till later. Lamar Jackson has been a starter since the end of his rookie year. Okay. And he's amazing. This is like, all of this is nitpicking, especially when we're talking about a top 10 list. This is all nitpicking. And a lot of it is because I think Lamar Jackson is so good. And even though he's not on my favorite team, I look at Lamar Jackson and I think he's so good that it is a disappointment to me that he doesn't have at least a Super Bowl. All right. So to me, honestly, these gripes are really a compliment. The fact that I think he should have a Super Bowl by now. I would have thought by now he would have. That game, it disappointed me because it was like, I just thought he would be able to pick his spots and be able to have. There were so many wide open lanes and times like that where he could have easily picked up a first down, and he didn't do it. And again, the other guys on this list, there's 3 guys next on the list that are not as accomplished as Lamar Jackson. But
there's only one guy that's as accomplished.
Yeah, I
or
mean,
two quarterbacks right now, 2.
Yeah. So, but they haven't had as many opportunities, in my opinion, where I can say they should have. Even if I'm giving him his second year, I think Lamar Jackson, I think we would all agree he should be wearing 1 Super Bowl ring by now. He should. It's just that simple.
I mean, last year to me was the big one. I still think they could do better in terms of receiving core for him. But anyway, so my number 5, and this is probably my shocker of the top 10 probably, is CJ Stroud.
He's on my list.
Look, 9-6 last year. They made, as a starter, he was 9-6. They made the playoffs, won a playoff game, 4,100 yards, 23-5 touchdown interception ratio, threw an interception on 1% of his passes, which I get. It's not realistic for him to expect that to happen again.
No.
He's going to regress towards the mean in that regard, but he's going to be a better
Yeah.
quarterback overall. About a
Mm-hmm.
64% completion, 8.7 yards per attempt. They added weapons. They added Diggs to Nico Collins and Tank Dell. John Mechie III is their number 4 wide receiver. If he's healthy, look, people forget about how good and explosive, and you're going to
Yes.
put him running down the field. Schultz is a good tight end.
Yes.
Joe Mixon added as a running back to Pierce is one of the most underrated all-around running backs because the Bengals have had such a terrible line. His per touch numbers are pretty low, but he's going to be splitting now with Pierce. I think his efficiency is going to be higher than it's been in years. Their O-line is the one part of the offense where you can point at and say, not a fan other than at left tackle with Tunzel. Yeah. He's a great decision maker. I mentioned this when we talked about the Texans and when he played against Georgia in the playoffs. The guy, he's good. And I have him, at 5 because the guys I have ahead of him are a little bit more accomplished. And even going into a second year in the league, it's very difficult to win. I think Roethlisberger did it, but again, Roethlisberger wasn't the reason. They were a defensive running team. It wasn't like Roethlisberger was throwing for 4,500 yards like he did later in his career, right, when they won. I mean, I love C.J. Stroud, man. This kid, he will be an MVP at some point. Houston is not known for being a good organization, but they're making the right moves. They're building a culture. I love the coaching staff they have. They have a good defense. They should make the postseason. Again, 1-1 in the playoffs. That loss coming against Baltimore. I think it's a lot to expect him to get further this year than they did last year. I don't know if they'll make the AFC Championship. I don't think they will, but it wouldn't shock me if they did. But yeah, I have CJ Stroud as my number 5. So send it back over to you for number 4. Or actually, I'll talk about Stroud since you said you have him on your list.
Yeah, so we might as well go to 4 because it's CJ Stroud.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. For example, when I talked about Brock Purdy, and I said I have him at 9 and I had the 8 in front of him because I think that the Niners would have been a better team with them. If CJ Stroud is in the 49ers last year, they are looked at as a historically good team. They are looked at as one of the greatest teams of all time. I'm not saying the greatest, but I'm saying they're looked at historically. That's how good I think Stroud is. It's only a sample size, and I get it. This is going to sound like I have to reiterate again. The Lamar Jackson thing. I think he's been in multiple positions, 2 specifically, where I believe that he should have, at the very least, made a Super Bowl, and he didn't. And he should have 1 ring by now, in my opinion. Again, that's a compliment to him. I have C.J. Stroud ahead of him because I believe that C.J. Stroud, the league is becoming a more athletic league. Quarterbacks have to. You can't have a stationary quarterback. You just can't. So you can't have a quarterback who's going to just stand there. The Phillip Rivers, the Dan Marino, even with his quick release, those quarterbacks that is the past. You can't do that with these defensive ends who can run 4.4s, 4.5s, and the game is so much quicker. But you don't have to be a Lamar Jackson, who's, again, one of the freakiest athletes this league has ever seen. CJ Stroud is athletic enough to get away from anybody, but he's also still in a mold of a traditional. If you ask receivers, who would they rather have as their quarterback, CJ Stroud or Lamar Jackson? If it was a blind poll and they knew their name wasn't going to get out, I guarantee you the vast majority would say they'd rather have CJ Stroud as their quarterback than Lamar Jackson. He's going to get the ball to his receivers. He is, we're only 1 year in. We're only 1 year in. I think that the Texans could take a step back. Do I think they're going to make the AFC Championship this year? I don't know. Would I be surprised if they did? Probably not. Probably not, because I believe in the coaching and I believe in the quarterback, and they have added talent. But he could potentially take a step back where he loses in the division round, but still be a much better quarterback. I think at some point he will win a Super Bowl. I think at some point he might win 2 Super Bowls. I'm very high on CJ Stroud. And we already kind of addressed a lot of stuff, so it doesn't really make too much sense to kind of go more in detail. But I have it number 4.
So my number 4, and I know where you have this person, so I know he's on your list. I'm curious about the other one person who's on your list in your top 3. But
Yeah.
my number 4 is Josh Allen. I know you're super high on him. You are a massive believer in him. That's why I think you have him at second, which we'll find out in a minute. I know he's on your list for sure, because if you don't have him in your list, then there's something wrong. Allen and the 2 guys that I have at second and third, if you move them around into different positions, I wouldn't be mad at it. It's a preference, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But a big reason why I have him at fourth is the lack of weapons he has this year. And he has a very big opportunity to really change a lot of minds about him.
Mm-hmm.
What wide receiver is going to step up? They have good tight ends, good running backs. So it's going to be a lot of underneath and intermediate passes, where Josh Allen has a big arm and wants to throw the ball down the field. So if he can fight that urge and really take just his shots as they come in the game instead of continuously trying to push it down the field, I think it will benefit him. I think statistically, in terms of yards and touchdowns, this will probably be his worst season since his second year in the league. He has been top 5 in MVP voting in 3 of the last 4 years, top 8 in Offensive Player of the Year in 3 of the last 4 years. He had 15 rushing touchdowns last year. He's got to cut down on his turnovers, though, because every year he's on the top. And we talked about it. Strong arm quarterbacks a lot of times do.
Yeah.
But he also fumbles a lot.
Yeah.
And he takes a lot of wear and tear on his body. I don't know how much longer he's going to be a quarterback in the NFL. Like, right?
4 or 5 years,
Newton.
maybe.
Think of Cam Newton, how quickly he declined. He went from MVP to pretty much out of the league in about 3-4 years.
Yeah.
It's a lot. Even though he's a big man, it's a lot. Getting hit is and then your shoulder and everything. But he's wildly inconsistent. To me, his completion percentage for his career is around 62, 63%. He's had a couple seasons that were better, but last year was just 63%.
Mm-hmm.
His average, right? This average over the last few years is 63% completion, about 4,300 yards, about 34 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, and 7.5 yards per attempt. That's a low completion percentage in today's NFL. That and to me, again, depending on if he fights the urge, his completion percentage is either going to increase, but his yards per attempt are going to go down because they're going to be shorter passes, or his completion percentage is going to decrease because he doesn't have the downfield threats. Gabe Davis was a great downfield threat. Stephon Diggs was one of the best receivers in the league last few years. You mentioned Lamar being ranked lower because you feel like guys should have won. Interesting you say that, because Buffalo, you can argue, actually had better rosters in certain years than Baltimore did. And they didn't get it done. And I'm not blaming Josh Allen necessarily specifically for it, but they have definitely given him better offensive weapons than they've given Lamar Jackson.
Better
Stephon
offensive
Diggs
weapons, not better teams.
is 100% a better receiver, twice as good as any receiver that Lamar's played with. Now, Zay Flowers has a chance to obviously get better. He was a rookie.
Yeah.
But Buffalo also had elite defenses in the beginning of his tenure there. When they first got Diggs, those were years that you could argue that the Bills should have won too. They spent money on defense. They had good safeties. They had 2 Pro Bowl safeties. They had good corners. They had good linebackers. They had pass rushers. They had Pro Bowl pass rushers. This year's going to say a lot about Josh Allen. And I think I said it earlier on the last episode, this is the season. If Josh Allen wins an MVP, this is the year he's going to do it, because he'll put up numbers and be successful on a team that has less talent. And people look at that in a different way, right? Because if Josh Allen just does the same thing he does year over year, to me, if he does it, it will look better this year because he did it with less.
Yeah.
But that's my number 4. So send it to you for your number. or we'll talk about Josh Allen. I know he's on your list at 2 or 3, but go ahead and
So
talk about him, and then go to your 3.
I'll say this: I've thought Lamar Jackson was an outstanding quarterback as soon as he was drafted. Boom, just find a way to fit a scheme that fits his skill set, and he's going to win games. The Josh Allen thing, I at first I was like, this guy's not a quarterback. Like, I mean, he's not a starting quarterback. He's just a guy. He's a project. Matter of fact, Josh Allen his development has changed my perception of a lot of how a quarterback can be developed. It's the reason why I'm really high on Anthony Richardson, because before Josh Allen, Josh Allen to me was just like another Ryan Mallett or another
Josh Rosen.
Josh Rosen
More athletic though.
But he seemed like, just another guy who was big, strong, big arm, and he looked like the part. Like he looked like what people
like
think a
Bortles
quarterback should look like. Yeah. So to me, that's all he was. And I'm like, this guy's not good. I didn't become a believer in Josh Allen until like the last 2 seasons. And then watching him play, I was like, man, this guy's really good. And to me, it was like at a certain point, I said, God, man, like to me, because I'll tell you this, even with all the turnovers, I thought he was the MVP last year. I really did. I thought he was the MVP of last season, even with the turnovers. He didn't become this guy in my eyes, like I said, until the last 2 seasons. I've always thought Lamar Jackson was really, really good. That's why, in my mind, he should have more than he has. Josh Allen shouldn't have been a starter when he was a starter. The second year was okay. He would have some few splash plays, but he was a turnover waiting to happen. He didn't that season when he got Diggs. That's why I think the Diggs thing was really important for him to have as a development. Because I tell you, if he didn't get Diggs, I think he still would be that project quarterback that I saw before. The Diggs introduction to the team was huge for his development. Now I think he's at a point where he doesn't need Diggs to be able to be the highly productive, highly successful quarterback. He's gotten to that point. He's broken the code. Again, that has more to do with the fact that I've always thought Lamar Jackson. I didn't understand why Lamar Jackson wasn't a top 3 pick in the time, let alone maybe the first pick. And at the time, I didn't understand why Josh Allen was a first-round pick. I thought he should have been a 3rd or 4th-round pick.
It's crazy. Side note on that, John Elway just did an interview, and they drafted Bradley Chubb, right, 5th.
Yeah.
And they have Bradley Chubb actually as and a lot of people did, as the top player coming out of college.
Yeah.
That year, right? And there were 3 quarterbacks that went before. 2, because it was Baker. Darnold went 3rd. Saquon went 4th. I can't remember who went 2nd. And Bradley Chubb, they picked 5th. And John Elway said, my biggest regret as an executive was not drafting Josh Allen. He's like, Josh Allen reminded me of me.
Yeah.
But we had just signed Case Keenum after the Minnesota Miracle.
Mm-hmm.
And we had Bradley Chubb as the top-rated player on the board. And we didn't think he'd fall to 4 or to 5.
Yeah.
And he did. And so we felt we had to take him. He's like, he was worried that drafting Josh Allen there, he knew it would be a project, and he was worried that would actually set the Broncos back even further, although in hindsight, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, just interesting.
No. I saw that, and I thought it was interesting because, again, and Josh Allen is I've always compared him to Cam Newton. I think he's like Cam Newton with a little bit of Brett Favre. Unfortunately, a lot of the Brett Favre he has is the stupid part of Brett Favre, where he throws a ball where you say, what the hell was he thinking? He tends to do that from time to time. But I think his talent and everything else, and yeah, I don't think like this. I don't think anybody's going to want 33-year-old Josh Allen.
Mm-hmm.
I think he'll be out of the league probably, and I'm not wishing. I just don't like speaking this stuff about these athletes because I want them to all have 20-year careers, make as much money as they can, and give us the viewing pleasure of seeing them perform at their highest level. But if he's in the league in 5 years, or if he's a highly I'm not gonna say in the league, but if he's still a Pro Bowl caliber player in 5 years, I'd be shocked.
Me too.
I'd be
Yeah.
1,000% shocked. Um, but I can't talk about him right now because I want to talk about who's my third. And I think this is another guy. I tell you, this is another guy that if you would have told me a few years ago that I would have been this high on him, I would have been shocked. I I was definitely a part of the Herbert is overrated game. And I just thought he was a product of all these stat
God, you
geeks.
have him third?
Listen to hear me out. Just hear me out. Hear me out. I was a big these stat geeks. Herbert is just, he's just all these guys who are in the stats and QBR and blah 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 and all this other stuff. And I'm like, I would watch him play, and I'm like, this dude is like a mistake waiting to happen. And kept watching him play, kept watching the games. I'm like, God, he has to overcome a lot. Like, I don't think people understand when you have to overcome your opponent and your coaching, it's bad. And then you watch him play, and then some of the stuff that really shines out. Because again, I've never been stats do tell the story, but if you literally just only go by stats and don't watch people play,
Mhm.
it just is not the end all be all. I always use this as an example. I almost broke my phone when years ago I saw a real life post, real life men arguing in the comment section. And the post said, if Steve Young is in the Hall of Fame, Ryan should be in the Hall of Fame. Look at their stats. I wanted to break my phone and I wanted to find everybody who commented and fight them, not individually, just as a group, fight them all at one time. The stats don't tell the story. And you watch Herbert play, he's got everything, man. He's big, he's athletic. I used to watch that when I used to watch Oregon play. Big athletic kid, strong arm. Again, arm. So every once in a while, he's going to do something that you're going to say, what was that? But I think yes, he has less talent on offense. And again, this is for this season.
Mhm.
It has much to do with, as much as I respect Justin Herbert's talent as a quarterback, as much as I respect Jim Harbaugh as a coach. I think Jim Harbaugh is going to put him in a position to be successful. That's what Jim Harbaugh has always done. Jim Harbaugh gets hired at UC Davis. His coach, his quarterback, becomes an NFL player. He goes to Stanford. Now, I'm not saying that they wouldn't have without him. He goes to Andrew Luck develops into the first pick overall. He goes to the 49ers.
Andrew
Alex
Luck
Smith
was
goes
going to
from
be the
being,
first round pick out of high school, though,
I
man.
get that. I get that. I totally get that. I get that. I get that. But I'm talking about a trend here. He goes to the 49ers. I watch it firsthand. I watch the game. He takes Alex Smith from being at that time a bust to being a good quarterback to having a good rest of his career. He takes Kaepernick, who I thought was a raw talent at the time, and I thought was going to end up being an all-time great. We're not touching that. And he turns him to a Super Bowl quarterback. Okay, he leaves. He goes to Michigan. He eventually turns J.J. McCarthy into a first-round quarterback. Yes, there were some quarterbacks. I left some quarterbacks out from Michigan, Shea
A
Patterson, all these
lot
other guys. I left some out. I will admit that. I will admit that.
of all the
But
rest.
I admit that. I just admitted to it. He is going to allow Herbert to go to another level. With that talent, Herbert is the most, aside from Andrew Luck, Justin Herbert is the most talented quarterback he will ever have coached at this point in his career. He will be the most talented quarterback, and that's saying something because I thought Kaepernick was incredibly talented. Herbert is a more talented quarterback, and he's a better quarterback than Colin Kaepernick was.
Absolutely.
So it has as much to do with as much talent I see in Herbert and his ability to be a high-end quarterback, and mix that with a coach that I think is a Hall of Fame coach, and that's why I have him 3.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, maybe down the line, this year they don't have the offensive players for him to be top 3. So we got to agree to disagree on that. That's why I had him lower. But like I said, I had him 10. My 3 is Joe Burrow. We already talked about him.
Yeah.
So your 2 is Josh Allen. Mine's Lamar Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
And then number 1 we both have. So go ahead and start it.
Patrick Mahomes is, and this is going to look. I'm just going to do it because it's going to. You know what? It doesn't matter because I've said it before in episodes. This is going to step on a future episode. Patrick Mahomes is the greatest quarterback I've ever seen. If you just said, "Hey, teams, your GM and all of you GMs, we're doing a fantasy draft, and you guys we have plutonium. We all have what is that car called? DeLoreans outside waiting for you guys. You have a time machine. We're selecting a draft, and whoever gets the first pick, you can go each one. You can go in time and you can pick your player, and you can all pick your quarterback right now. Whoever gets the first pick is going to draft Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is the greatest quarterback we have ever seen up to the point of 2024. There may be a guy who's better in 2 years from now. There may be a guy who's in 8th grade right now who's going to be better. Or there may be a guy who was just born yesterday who's going to be better. But up to this point, Patrick Mahomes is the greatest quarterback I have ever seen. And I believe he is the greatest quarterback that we all have seen. He's been a starter for 5 years. And in 5 years, I'm sorry, 6 years, forgive me, 6 years. 6 years. And in 6 years, he went AFC Championship, would have went to the Super Bowl if D4 didn't go offsides. He went Super Bowl, won that. Next year, he lost the Super Bowl in one of the greatest performances I've ever seen because his whole line was decimated. Next year, let's see, he loses in the AFC Championship, I believe, because they had one of the worst drives that you can possibly have right before the halftime. Next year, he wins the Super Bowl. Next year, he wins the Super Bowl. I hate to say it, but they have a great chance to do something that nobody has ever done in this league. He has the greatest chance to go 3-peat. And he's going to put up monster numbers this year because we have all unfortunately disrespected him and the Chiefs. And they freaking put Tyreek Hill as the number 1 player in that top 100. So his peers have disrespected him. And they had him as the second best quarterback in that list. So he's got all these reasons to go hellraiser on everybody next year.
He was like 5th, wasn't he?
No, but I said the second best quarterback.
No, but they put him like 5th overall.
4th.
Or something. 4th, yeah.
They had CMC, Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, they had a running back ahead of him.
They had a running back ahead of him. So, and I'm a Niner fan. I don't agree with that. I mean, so Patrick Mahomes is the bane of every fan who is not a Chiefs fan. And Patrick Mahomes has made me go from being a fan of Nick Wright at times because he's a LeBron James fan like me to half the time I can no longer stand him.
Yeah, I can't stand him, man. He's so annoying to me. I don't even care if I agree with him. I can't stand him.
But this is the thing is I would be just as annoying as him if I was a Chiefs fan. Patrick Mahomes would be number 1 on this list for the next 6 years at least. What is he, 28, 29?
He'll be 29 September 17th.
I said 6 years. He'll be number 1 on this list the next 7 to 8 years. And I'm just hoping my Niners could get 1 ring. Just one. Because if not, then, they may not get one during his time. And none of us may see another Super Bowl win unless he gets hurt one year, like Tom Brady.
Well, I'm not seeing one anytime soon. So, yeah, I'm not holding my breath.
So, that's yeah. I mean, there's nothing else to say about him.
Yeah. Look, your Niners better win this year, or I think their window is closed. Once they have to pay Brock Purdy, I think it's going to start falling apart for them.
Well, that and CMC.
Well, they extended him, but
his age.
Yeah, absolutely. In the wear and tear. Yeah. They're limited, but yeah, Patrick Mahomes. Look, I have him number 1 too, and this is after a year. He has a career low in touchdown percentage, 4.5% of his passes. His average is 6.1. And this is aside from his rookie year where he played one game and he won that game against the Broncos week 17. Career high in number of interceptions with 14 and interception percentage at 2.3. Career low in yards per attempt at 6.9. His career average is 8.3. A 63.1 QBR was career low. 92.6 rating was a career low, and 10-6 team record was a career low, and they won the Super Bowl. I hate the man, dude. I got to face him twice a year.
This was the year to get him. I've
talked about it. Yes, I talked about it before. The first time he was the actual starter, not this first game but the first year as a starter against the Denver Broncos, and he threw that pass when Von Miller had him sacked with his left hand. I at that point I said I will be in my 50s before I see another Super Bowl championship for the Broncos. I'm 35. It may be the 40s, who knows, but it's going to be a long time. Okay, I'm not going to see a division championship for at least another 5 years. We're at best in the league. But anyway, this is about Patrick Mahomes. Look,
I know it's stressful.
I don't like. You don't have to face him every year. You know, I mean, you do this year, but we got to face him twice a year. Okay,
look, I can't. In the most stressful.
Yeah, well, if you get there again, but look, we got to face him twice a year, whether we're good or not. Okay, so
sure.
The Chiefs. Listen, I just rattle off all these career lows for Patrick Mahomes. So what do? They go out and they sign Hollywood Brown to go deep. They sign Xavier Worthy to go deep. The only question they have is left tackle.
Yeah.
They have a second-year player and a rookie.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm the Chiefs, I write a letter to David Bakhtiari, and I say to him, look, how much do you want to win a Super Bowl? What are you willing to take? A 1-year contract, fully guaranteed. Come here and play left tackle, show these youngsters how it's done, and win a Super Bowl. And then you can go somewhere else. He said he wants to play 3 more years. Look, it scares me that he hasn't signed with anyone yet because the Chiefs play their first preseason game this week. You know, they're going to see the left tackles without Patrick Mahomes back there. That's the position to watch for Kansas City. That's what they're watching closest. And if those guys aren't ready, watch them sign David Bakhtiari. And that will, to me, if he can stay healthy, that would solidify the Chiefs are winning the Super Bowl. If they sign David Bakhtiari to play left tackle and he stays healthy the whole year, just mail the season in. Play for regular season stats and MVPs. Don't even play the postseason. Hand the Chiefs the trophy. Let's try again next year.
Well, I'll say one other thing too is we can hope that L'Jarius Sneed is missed a lot more than people are projecting.
The Chiefs organization, he was, but the Chiefs organization has done such a good job drafting.
I know.
Replacing talent with players that can come in and play at a cheap cost.
Yeah.
McDuffie was like
good.
Second team All-Pro, and now he's your number one. Okay.
Yeah.
Their offense is going to be better. So even if their defense takes a step back, they're going to score more points.
Yeah. And I'm a big Pacheco fan. I like him.
I do too. And they're going to be able to throw the ball down the field more, which is going to open up the running game more.
Yeah.
We
seem so defeated right now.
Look, I can't.
This list just made us both sad.
I literally the last couple seasons and for the foreseeable future, I look forward to football season for fantasy because my team's trash and I have to face this guy twice a year.
Yeah. And
just watch them and then they keep showing his no offense, but his wife is very annoying on camera. She may be a sweet woman, but on camera, she bugs me. And Taylor Swift constantly. Cool. I mean, getting DUIs.
I love this pie. I love his pops. His pops is super cool. His pops look like he smoked Newports. Like his pops and drink
He's
whiskey.
smoking something. Well, he's drinking whiskey and then get behind the wheel of the car. That's the problem. But look, yeah, it's Patrick Mahomes, and there's no other answer to this, and there's not going to be another answer, barring an injury for the next foreseeable future. So, unless you got anything else to add, that's going to end this episode.
No, I'm depressed now.
Next time. So. Yeah, we'll be back next time with a more different list. At least the Chief won't be number one on the next list when we talk about the top 10 running backs. But thank y'all for tuning in. We appreciate you. Y'all have a good one.
Take care.